I built and scaled a pay-per-show lead gen agency to $10,000 a month, and in this video, I'm going to give away all of the secrets so that you can achieve the same results. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I priced my services, how I actually sold those services, how I was able to track appointments, and how I was able to track showed appointments. Okay, now let's get into this and be straight to the point. Okay, so the purpose of a pay-per-show offer, right, is to make sales extremely easy so you can get your first few clients and make a ton of money at the same time, right? And with this model, closing deals is so ridiculously easy that you're not even going to understand why. Okay, so we need to basically make sure that our offer is a no-brainer in terms of our pricing, but we also need to make a lot of money at the same time. So I'm going to show you how to do that here, right? So what you want to do when pricing your pay-per-appointment offer is reverse engineer the value of the appointment, right, to your average client, and then charge 10%. You could even do 10 to 20% of that price. Okay, so that is basically how you want to price your service. Okay, so here's an example for gyms basically. Okay, so the average private gym membership, by the way, I'm completely making these numbers up. This is just to show you an example of how you'd actually figure this out. Okay, so the average private gym membership, let's say, is about $100 a month, and they stick around for an average of 20 months, right? Meaning that one client at this gym is worth $2,000, right? Because you multiply $100 a month times 20 months, right? It's $2,000, okay? The average gym closes at around 25%, okay? Meaning that if someone shows up to the gym, they are worth $500, right? Because we basically multiplied 25% by $2,000, which means for every single person who shows up to a gym, it's worth $500, right? Now, if the average show-up rate of a member is 40%, and someone schedules an appointment, right, they're worth $200 because we take 40% of 500. Now they're worth $200, meaning that a fair price to charge for the appointment, right, is about $20 to $30 because that is 10 to 20% of this 200, right? You could even say 20 to $40, right, for that, right? Now again, this is based on numbers that I just made up, so actually do your own numbers, right? I'll give you a couple more examples. So if you're working with landscapers, the average revenue of a large project, right, is worth about $10,000 with, let's say, 20% margin and a close rate of 35%. Okay, and if there is an appointment, right? Sorry, if there's no no-show rate for a landscaper, since the landscaper is going to show up at their house, basically, meaning there's a value of an appointment for a landscaper of about $700, right? Because we took 35% times $10,000 times 20% margin, right? Is $700. Okay, this is two grand profit times 35%. Is this, okay? Meaning it would be fair to charge $70 to $140 per appointment, right? If we're doing 10 to 20%, okay? Now, again, I made these numbers up, so do your own market research and figure out what your numbers are, right? So I did this for marketing agencies primarily and consultants, right? And when I used to do this, basically, the average agency was charging about $1,500 per month, right? And it would stick around for about 5 months, meaning a client would be worth about $7.5K, and the average client had a closing rate of about 15%, meaning the showed appointment would be worth $1,125 with a 60% show-up rate, right? Because we're multiplying this by this. The average appointment value would be worth about $675. So fair price to charge would be about $100 to $125 per show, or $70 per appointment. Okay, that's basically how you do that, and that is how you price your service. Okay, easy enough, just some math. If you want to rewatch that, then you can. But that's basically all the examples that you should need. Okay, now let's get to selling. How do we actually sell this product? Okay, so when you tell a prospect how much this costs, right, if they're inexperienced as well, right, they think it might be too high. So if you do this, right, you're going to basically ask them for the LTV of the client. You're going to ask them, like, this is in profit, by the way. You're going to ask them for the conversion rate on sales calls and their show-up rate to the calls, okay? After you've done this, you're literally just going to do the math that I just did right here, right in front of them, and they're going to be like, 90% of the time, if they're not an idiot, right, which most of the time they're not, they're going to understand that basically it's actually not that expensive, right? Literally, I've had so many objections selling this. They're like, oh, that's too much. And then I just do the math and they're like, oh, okay, it's actually pretty cheap, right? So you just do that in front of them, typically works. Okay. Now, how do you actually track appointments? So when I actually ran this agency, right, the way that I tracked appointments is purely through Go High Level. Okay. So for example, when I signed up a client, I would set up a new sub account for them. If you don't know how to do that, there's a whole bunch of Go High Level tutorials online that you can just search up, right? And I would make a calendar link, right, that I would just use for them. So this is basically how you do that. You go to this calendar section under the sub account. Again, you can search up how to set up a Go High Level sub account. It's pretty simple. You go to create calendar, round robin. I would just call this like strategy session, and then in brackets JKD, right? Because that's basically the initials of my company, so that I know that this appointment came from me, right? And then you just set up this calendar like you normally set up a calendar, right? Now, basically, once we do that, I'll actually make this. A calendar just so I can use it later, because I'm going to show you the automation. So we'll call it strategy session, and then we'll select myself, right? And then we will select this on, and then this would just be connected to the Google Calendar, so you can have this on basically all the time, right? And then you just click confirm, and then we just do this. Okay, pretty simple. And then we would close this, right? Now, what we would do here, right, is that I would set up an automation. So every time a sales call was booked for one of my clients, I would basically get a notification on my phone, right? You can also do it through Slack. I think eventually I transitioned it into like basically automatically filling out a spreadsheet, but that was a long time ago. I forgot how to do that, to be honest, right? So the phone works well. And then at the end of the billing cycle, which was every 2 weeks for me, I would basically bill their card on Stripe for the amount that I booked, right? So basically, the way that I set up this automation is you'd go to here, basically, you go to automation, okay? And then what you do is you'd create a workflow, and then you would go to start from scratch, okay? And essentially, how you would do this is you would go to customer booked appointment, right? And then you would basically choose the calendar, customer booked appointment, right? Add filters, and then you'd want to make sure it's in the calendar that is basically meant for you, right? So this is the one that we just made, strategy session JKD. And then what I would go do here is I would essentially save this, okay? Then what I'd go do here is basically do internal notification, okay? And you'd also build up your show up sequence in here. I have a whole video basically showing you my show up system, so you could implement that for your clients as well. And then I would make this an SMS notification, right, to user. You could do custom number, and then basically you would just put your phone number inside of here, and you would put the message. You could just say, hey, right, I can just say, hey, Josh, an appointment was booked. Yay, right? And then you just save this, and then you put your phone number here. I'm not going to do that, obviously. And then you click publish, and then you save. And then every time a customer books into this appointment, then you basically get a notification, and then you make money. Okay, so that's basically how that works. Now, this is the key part. So how do you actually track the showed appointments? Okay, so when I was tracking shows, I basically had a spreadsheet, and I still do. So my setters basically use this. And every time a prospect books into the call, I would add their name into that spreadsheet, okay? So every time someone booked a call into my client's calendar, I would basically go into here, right? So I'd have one for each of my clients. I would put the name of the prospect. We wouldn't have their social media URL. The day that they booked, right? So when did they actually schedule the call? And then when did they schedule the call for, right? So if today it's the 4th of July, if they booked for the 8th of July, then I would just put date booked here is the 4th of July. And date here is the 8th of July, right? And then the client on the 8th of July, right, they would put basically what happened to the call. Did they close? Did they show, reschedule, no show, canceled, right? And if they no showed or canceled, right, or then I would basically call up the prospect and I would basically schedule them in. And obviously, if they're telling me I did show up and the client says they didn't, then obviously I know the client's lying, and I'm going to be like, hey, Mr. Client, you're not telling me the truth here. This prospect's telling me that he showed up. And obviously, like, they basically give them a warning, like, I'm just not going to do this anymore if you're going to be dishonest, right? So most of the time, like, I never had that issue. All my clients were basically honest, which is really nice. But if that does happen, then obviously you're going to be following up with people who don't show, so you will know if they show up or not, and then you can build their card. So that's basically how that works. Hopefully this was helpful. If you want a guaranteed system to generate you more appointments, you can click the first link in the description. If not, I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.